When you are stuck and you don't have the energy and you're maybe co-conspirating with your bad day and you kind of know it, I want to give you a little bit of hope. The thing that you know you don't want to do, but if you just get moving, like whatever your thing is that you need to do that you know wakes you up, that alone was enough to kind of begin to tip the scale. I'm surprised at how short the discomfort was and yet how full the tank became in such a tight window. The key here is taking agency, where I'm doing a thing that's really counterintuitive and uncomfortable for a little bit of time, very brief, and all of a sudden there's like a chamber of possibility opens up that I didn't think was accessible. In fact, wasn't accessible until I zagged. As humans, we prefer the path of least resistance. We crave convenience, the payoff without the price. But when our lives revolve around comfort, it doesn't deliver. Living in perpetual comfort leaves us weak and asleep. This podcast is an invitation to flip that script, to choose the unlikely path, to get the life you really want through voluntary discomfort. This is Strong and Awake. I'm Dane Sanders. Mitch, I want to talk today about down days. Days when you feel like stuck before you start, and what it takes to interrupt that phenomenon. And to get there, I want to tell a story. So this one's live, actually was this morning, and I'm wondering if you'd be up for me doing a little story time to get this thing started.
Yeah, I'll speak for all of our listeners. I'd love to hear
the
Dane Sanders
You're
story.
very generous. You're very generous. Okay, here it goes, and I'll be quick. So I get up this morning, and Friday morning I have a standing meeting. I have this meeting with these guys where we talk about spiritual things on Friday mornings, and it's a meeting I always look forward to being in, but it totally screws up my day. I tend to leave my mornings as kind of deep work, head down space time, and when I start with collaborative work or meetings, it tends to throw off my whole day, and that's been happening. Just like today it happened. Woke up, got after it, but I not only had that meeting, uncharacteristically, I had another meeting right after. My daughter's boyfriend wanted to get coffee, and I was like, I gotta meet with the kid if he wants to have coffee. I mean, he's dating my daughter. So now I got 2 hour-long meetings in a row, and then I had a 3rd hour-long meeting, a doctor's appointment, that was also lined up, and I was like, my day's screwed before I started. So I had a bad attitude going into my day, even though these were all important things. They weren't the kinds of things that set me up to feel really motivated and after it. And I was just kind of down before I got going. So I go to my first meeting, went fine. Go to my second meeting, goes fine. They're still dating. Go to my third meeting, and I walk into the doctor's office and they don't have my appointment. And I'm thinking, why am I going to the doctor again? Like, it wasn't even clear to me why I was even there. It was just on my calendar. I was just totally on automatic going with the thing. And that was my first clue, that I was just kind of going from thing to thing. And I didn't quite realize the state I was in until that moment. And I would argue that if I even reflected out on how I would have predicted the rest of my day to have gone, here's what would have happened. I would have gone from thing to thing to thing, felt like a victim to every single meeting, even if they were good meetings. And I've seen this movie before. I would have gotten to the end of my day and I would realize deep regret. Like, that feeling of, really, this is as good as you can do on a Friday, and that's where I'd be. And then my best strategy to find the motivation to get after the important stuff that I think is really profitable and useful, my best strategy to get after that kind of motivation would have been go to bed, wake up tomorrow, hopefully it'll work out. And this very kind of passive posture. And again, I've spent a lot of my days in my life with that kind of a rinse and repeat experience. Not every day, but when I'll have a handful of days going really well. And then even that phrase, it went well, like I didn't go well, it went well. And I begin to kind of notice this drift that's going on. I'm drifting into something, but I didn't know I was in the drift. All I knew was I didn't feel very motivated, and I felt like I was on a trajectory to be very dissatisfied with the results of my day. And the reason I want to tell a story to start is to say two things. Number one, I'm curious if anybody listening can relate. And then two, that I have hope. But we'll get to the hope bit in a minute. Let's just first establish, does that resonate at all with you, Mitch? Do you have your version of some unfolding of a day that feels like you're dead. You're a dead man walking before you even start.
Yes. The long story short, yes. Oh man, in your story, you had all the kind of classic categories. You have the meeting, obligation, the thing that you want to be at with others, involved, like your group of guys or whoever you're gathering with in the morning. You've got work, the unspoken like work dynamics and obligations throughout your day that
Totally
are going on. You have your health, like a doctor's appointment or something going on. You've got other relationships like connecting and family. And like there are all these good things that often kind of tug at us. But I have experienced all of those and the other categories that I kind of use as an excuse to kind of let myself off the hook or let this thing derail my day, or like you were saying, just let myself be a victim to these things. And as a recovering perfectionist too, I find I'm more and more aware of where I'm a victim in this category, like looking for really good excuses, really worthwhile things that have derailed me that I can kind of let myself off the hook for even trying to change that conversation, change the day, the trajectory of the day. I think a lot of people could relate to all those things that can derail our days. But what was it about that moment in the doctor's office or anything that followed that helped you not just identify and have the wherewithal to kind of realize the situation that you're in, but to begin to kind of shift or pivot?
To find my way out.
In a different place.
Yeah, because I will say, fast forward, and I'll tell you the middle part in a second. My day didn't go the way that it would traditionally go. Mm-hmm. It's actually still late morning, and that trajectory got interrupted, and that's the hopeful bit that we're going to get to in a minute. But I'm glad that you're asking the question. When I started to kind of see the trend lines, what happened next, and I will say this: we're not going to talk about choose your role directly today, but today's conversation really does pair well with that episode. So when this is done, if you're like, I'd like a little deeper dive on this, I do think choose your role is a really helpful kind of almost like a philosophical underpinning to today's conversation. But today's really about something more practical than that. Like, forget having distinctions in your mind and clarity of kind of how these dynamics work. All I want you to think about is on those days where you feel like the day has you, like it's picked you up and it's taking you somewhere, and you're like, I know where this is taking me, and I feel totally powerless. I feel like it's like I'm obligated to the doctor. I'm obligated to the family. I'm obligated to work or kind of committed meetings with people that are important. And the opening for me, and this was a little bit of a gift, but the opening for me was when I went to go to the doctor's appointment, and they're like, they didn't have my appointment ready. And they actually did have me on the books. But what's interesting was they're like, they're no dummies. They're like, oh, we can get you in. And they started kind of scrambling to get me in. And I was kind of going with the flow. And then it just occurred to me like, wait a minute. I'm to give a quick context. it was an orthopedic. I'm going to physical therapy for this foot injury that I have. And I'm still in physical therapy. And I said, like, I don't totally know why I'm here. This is just a checkup, and I still have a problem, and I'm going to physical therapy. And they'll say, well, if you're still going, why don't you keep going? I'm like, I'm going later on today. That sounds great. And all of a sudden I had this little window, this sliver of time where I was like, I'm not out of the woods yet, but I'm awake enough to know something needs to happen, and it needs to happen in this very tiny window. Not a lot, but something material had to happen. So I walk into the doctor's office, cancel my appointment, I walk in my doctor's office, and I have a little window of time where I can go, I can theoretically do something. But then what happened was I realized I was a bit of a co-conspirator to this thing that I was in the middle of. I didn't like how it feels at the end of my day, but I also didn't have the energy inside of me to just like all of a sudden get after the important stuff. It was almost like I was giving myself an excuse to not be responsible for my day. And what I was awake to was like, oh, I'm active now. This isn't like it's happening to me. This is like, I'm actually participating with it. And I had been since the first meeting in the morning and the second meeting, because the first meeting in the morning, I do it most every Friday. I don't stack other meetings after it, but yet I allowed for a second meeting that I thought was important. Maybe I could have made a request in the first meeting, move it to a different time. Or my daughter's boyfriend, we could have met another time. Like, I'm the boss in that relationship. That's not hard to go do. And then the third one, again, it kind of it's all interruptible. It's all interruptible. But yet there was something in it where, and this is the gift of the victim, right? The victim, the reason people choose the victim status over and over again is because when we do that, we're not responsible. It's all happening to us. That's the definition of victimhood. But the benefits of being a victim is you don't have to be responsible. And in that sliver of time, I was like, I get to be responsible in this moment if I choose it, and I don't want to choose it. How can I go get the motivation to choose it? And that's what I want to talk about. When you're stuck and you don't have the energy and you're maybe co-conspirating with your bad day and you kind of know it. In fact, even as I'm saying this word, some of you listeners right now, you're kind of sweating a little bit because you're like, crap, that's me. And that's like right now, even. I want to give you a little bit of hope because today's conversation is really about how do you self-generate motivation when you just don't feel it? When you're in stuck and you want to get to start, but the tank's empty. It's kind of like, I need some magic here. That's what I think would be worth a good conversation.
I agree. And I think it's important that you start there too, and even bring in the kind of choose your role conversation, because I think recognizing when we are being co-conspirators recognizes our agency in the situation, which is something that we often feel like we're completely lacking.
That's right.
Whenever our day is derailed. And sometimes, things do happen to us that are fully out of our control. Sure. I'm not going to, be naive and say that that's not true. But oftentimes it is a situation like this where you have quite a bit of agency, at least agency in how we respond to these situations. So I think that's such an important thing to call out. And I love that you did. Now the question is how do we begin to generate that kind of motivation, or look for it, or draw from it, or create that in the right ways and the right motivation. So I'd love to pivot to that.
The good news today is I'm not even going to help people get it to be right motivation. Let's not introduce morality to this thing. Let's just find some juice. Let's find some energy somehow, right? That's going in the direction. And this is where I'll describe my situation and dissect what I think happened. Okay. So I'm in the parking lot and I'm awake to what's going on. And I'm realizing my tendency is I kind of don't want to be motivated. I want to be motivated, but I don't actually in my current state want to be motivated. In fact, what I was envisioning was, I'm going to get another coffee and then I'll mess around and waste my half hour. And then I'll just get on to the next thing. And then I'm back in that kind of victim-y posture. And the first thing I did was notice, as we've talked about already. But the second thing I did was I need to do something different. I need to go in a direction that isn't the very natural thing to go do. And it might sound kind of silly, but I walk into the Starbucks and I don't order another coffee. I order a tea. And I don't know that there's nothing magical about making a different order at Starbucks. The point was I needed to zag when I was zigging. I needed to go I needed to do something tangible. So I walk up, I order a chamomile tea, no more caffeine. And I sit down and I just stop. And I go, what is going on? And, a good place to figure out what's going on is to actually write some things down, ask myself, have a conversation with myself. We have conversations with AI all day now. Why can't we have conversations with ourselves right now? So I did that, pulled out my journal, started writing little things. And I was like, oh yeah, this was the stuff that if I was motivated to do things, these are the kinds of things I'd want to go after. And gosh, these are attractive. If these were done, I'd be really glad they were done. And I'm realizing what I'm doing. I've seen this movie before. I've done this rinse and repeat experience before. I think I don't want that. And for whatever reason, it's not like I all of a sudden took an upper and was after it. It was more of a kind of this, it was like a slow fueling of the tank. I was conscious. I took pause where I had agent, I started writing in my journal. I chose the thing. I I did the unorthodox T and then went in the move of like not just pulling out my phone and scrolling and wasting time, but went into something that I was creating something. I was generating some energy, and I started warming up the engine. I started adding fuel to the tank. And I'll say this up front. It's helpful that I have some practices that I already do every day. There's some things like this is one of the huge upsides of even having a practice is when you don't have your bearings and you need to self-generate, go to the thing that your future self asked you to go do today that you haven't been doing yet, and go do those things. Go do those habitual things. So in our community, where this happens a lot is people get disoriented and they'll hold their breath. They'll jump into a cold shower. They'll check in to the community. They'll make a request. Hey, I'm way out of sync and I need to recalibrate here. Can someone give me some help? And for me this morning, the habit that was resourceful was to turn to my journal and again, become conscious and awake, and then actually kind of map my own journey, like map my path from here. I could even make a request. I was into my journal and you and I had a meeting coming up and I texted you 5 minutes before the meeting. I said, can we start in 15 instead? And you were like, that works for me. And like, I have agency everywhere. I have agency with a T. I have agency with my journal. I have agency with Mitch. And all of a sudden, it turns out agency is a self-generating motivator. I actually took responsibility, just grabbed the wheel. And it wasn't some dramatic, like, El Captain, my captain sees the day kind of like people are listeners to you know what that reference is. But the point is like, it is not some grand gesture. It's just getting a little bit of consciousness and traction and a little bit of movement that I chose. And when I chose it, I'm always surprised, so pleasantly surprised that when I choose it, especially the thing that I didn't want to do, what I wanted to do was go to Starbucks, have a coffee, and scroll. Instead, I went to Starbucks, had a tea, and wrote in my journal. Little move. And it doesn't have to be journaling, it could be some other move for you. But the thing that you don't want to do, but if you just get moving, get a couple words down, put your sneakers on, walk outside, take your sneakers and socks off, put your feet in the grass, like whatever your thing is that you need to do that wakes you up. That alone was enough to kind of begin to tip the scale. And then I started moving with steady intention. And now I'm waking up. It's not even noon. My day's not lost. I'm after it. And I'm surprised at how short the discomfort was, and yet how full the tank became in such a tight window. Now, I want to make one quick comment before we keep going about those moments when something really grave happens to us. You walk into the doctor and they tell you some bad news. You get in a car accident. Like there's something that's not just like the drift is taking you somewhere, but a serious whirlwind has hit you and you're a little traumatized or disoriented at a level it's not just like snap out of it. It's like you're under it. I want to suggest to you that even in those dire situations, there's an ability to gain agency. And I'm running a risk here because it might sound very insensitive. But even when people find out bad news from the doctor, even when they get in a car accident, even when something happens,
lose their job.
Yeah, they lose their job. Right. There's a moment of like, natural disorientation. But as soon as you reasonably can, you don't have to like be done with it or pretend like Pollyanna that everything's okay. But you can still take responsibility for like, well, here I am. Here I am in a very awful situation. And what if I could find a pinch of agency, a pinch of I'm going to choose to be responsible to do the next thing for myself? What might that result in? And in my experience and in watching hundreds of people go through our community, I'm always moved, deeply moved, when we hear these stories. Every Thursday, we have this thing called Thursday Truth, where people share these remarkable moments of people grabbing the reins, taking agency, and the results that come from it. And we have people who are going through cancer treatments right now. We have people who have lost loved ones. We have, or are losing loved ones in real time, or did lose their job. And they're not under a bus for like 9 months. It's more like 9 minutes. And it's not like they're out from underneath the bus in 9 minutes, but they're making moves where they have something in the tank to do it, as opposed to they're going to numb out. They're going to choose the comfortable path. They're going to find the easy way. They're going to say, the best I can do is get through today's sleep, and hopefully tomorrow will be better if the gods give me the juice. But what we're suggesting is juice is self-generating, or at least it can be. And the path to get it doesn't always happen from a grand gesture. It comes from little moves of, if I could be responsible for one little thing right now, what would that be? And would I do it?
I love that the move, or the first move too in your process, was slowing down. It's like removing things, or like committing to not do things. And I think we often think, no, that's not taking action, because it's by definition inaction. But when in fact that was the very thing that gave you the space, gave you the wherewithal to begin to make some of these shifts, to begin to, like, we've talked about learning to ride a bike, and how going quickly, moving fast while counterintuitive, like, means, wow, it's more stable. Oh, it's harder to steer when I've got forward momentum. But in the same way, like, it is hard to steer when you have that much forward momentum. So slowing down was that thing that was able to start to begin to shift that, which I really appreciate, because especially when you're feeling behind, these meetings, these interruptions, these things came up, like, you feel like, I can't slow down. Like, I can't, I'm behind. There's too much to do. I need to, that's when these people start, when they get into this position financially, making these really unwise, big gambles and bets. And I just appreciate that the very first thing you did was slow down and make those small shifts, which, well,
I was going to say, it's interesting to me. Like, I do think slowing down is what I did. And there's nothing in what you said that's untrue. It's all true. I could also see a scenario where I could wake up and feel melancholy and malaise, and I was already so slow that, slowing down further would have put me in a coma. Like, that's like,
yes.
It's more the zigzag principle. It's like, if you find yourself A, with no motivation, and then B, you notice your state is either going really fast or going really slow, maybe start with its opposite and see what shows up. And because the point here, we keep saying it, but I want to be overt to be explicit. The key here is taking agency. To your point of, like, I just need to kind of hit the grand slam home run, do the dramatic gesture, do the whatever. Yeah, if you're driving really, really fast and it feels like the best way to get out of this is to drive faster, probably not. And in the same way, there's been seasons in my life where I've been a sluggard. And the thing I need to do is get up. Like, again, this is why things like cold showers and breath holding are so profound. They're embodied moves of agency where I'm doing a thing that's really counterintuitive and uncomfortable for a little bit of time, very brief. And all of a sudden, there's like a chamber of possibility opens up that I didn't think was accessible. In fact, wasn't accessible until I zagged. And I guess that's where I wouldn't want people to hear that the answer to this is slow down. I think the answer could be slow down, but it also could be speed up. The point is, you're in a drift. Maybe you're in a storm, and whatever you're in, it's happening to you. To actually grab the reins will require you doing something that's surprising. That's counterintuitive. And it might be smaller than you think. When I think about the opportunity in this for people's practical lives, like, I imagine where people are at as they're listening to today's podcast. Maybe they're out on a run, or maybe they're listening to something in their car, or they're in an airport somewhere. And even the nature of, like, listening to a podcast, there's a sense in which it's a little bit of a trance, right? Like, it's thoughtful. It's kind of self-serving when I say it, thoughtful podcast, but let's pretend for a second that this podcast is thoughtful for a second. Like, I thought, when you're listening to a thoughtful podcast, it's rarely like Muzak in the background where you're kind of hoping it'll wash over you and you'll have a good experience. If that's the case, like, just turn on Spotify. Like, you don't need this podcast. But if you're listening to this, you're probably in a place where you're a little bit disconnected from life. You're in a trance. You're kind of pulled off into a little space, which I think is really, really helpful. So let's go with you're on a run. Say you're on a run and you're listening to this podcast and there's something in this that's resonating for you. And maybe you even went on a run because your day was going in a direction that, you're bummed on and you're just trying to get this one thing. I guess the thing I would encourage people to notice is the thing that you're doing perpetuating the state you were in before, or is it interrupting the state you were in before? So when people put on a podcast to escape, they aren't necessarily interrupting the situation. And some people who are listening right now might go yeah, this is what I needed. Helpful. Thank you. I'm turning it off because I don't want the podcast to be a co-conspirator with this trend line I'm on. That's the zag move I need to make. And if that's you, you're no longer listening anyway. So good on you. Off you went. But for others, you're realizing you've actually started the move already. There's something about this was the zag move. This was the, I need to get my bearings and this show's helpful to kind of interrupt some things. And here you are. What I want to talk about is when the show is over, what are you going to go do next? What's the single next thing you're going to go do? Because to really gain agency, it does require a handful of things that I don't want to miss. Number one, it's not just in your head. And this is the downside to listening to a podcast, right? You can feel like you're having an epiphany because you heard a new idea or a fresh idea, but just recognize you've not done anything with that idea until you've done something with that idea. So hearing it is not doing it, to be really crystal clear. Something is required in response. That's the first thing I want to say. The second is that thing desires your body to participate. Something concrete, material. For me, it was ordering an actual hot tea. It was pulling out my actual journal and putting my phone down. It was writing words. And the words literally were, it's Friday morning, I'm at a Starbucks. I just had to get in motion with my physical body that got things rolling. And I want to invite folks who are listening to think in those terms too. And the last thing I'll say, and this has nothing to do with what we've said so far, but I think it's something that I think is underrated, is talk out loud with somebody about what you're doing. Don't do it as an isolated individual. Do it, take action, but communicate what you're up to with someone in your real world and see if that doesn't bring even greater agency. We know from self-determination theory that agency is a long-term motivator that works almost every single time, but it's not the only thing that works every single time. When you get better at a skill every day, that also creates long-term motivation. But this third piece of when you're doing something in community, when there's a sense of belonging, when you're a part of something bigger than yourself, that also perpetuates that filling of the tank and getting the juice when you feel like you don't have any. And I want to suggest that if you can do that, if you can do these things in relationship with other people in an embodied way, in an action-oriented way, however small, you are going to discover motivation you didn't know you had. So when this podcast is done and you finish your run or the car ride or whatever it is, don't be satisfied with having an idea sparked. Only tick the box that you've gotten something out of this if you find yourself in motion in a way that maybe is a little surprising, it's a little zagging, but it's also in your physical body. Men and Women of Discomfort is our membership community, and we are open to everyone. But keep in mind, our tagline is, it's probably not for you. If we're wrong about that, or if you want to find out for yourself, you can find us at MWOD.io.